My name is Sandi Lear and I am a watercolour artist. There was something that occurred to me about 6 years ago that changed the way I look at life, and it changed the way I look at colours, and it changed the way I look at nature and the trees and clouds especially, and the ocean and animals, and it gave me a completely different new direction in life. So I had a complete career change. And fortunately, I was with someone who was very supportive at the time, and he said, he encouraged me to pursue this. Watercolour was something that just happened. I've never tried anything else. People are constantly telling me how difficult watercolour is. I had a gentleman walk in just a moment ago who said, "Oh, that's so difficult, that's so hard." And I said, "Really, is it? Nobody told me. I don't know how hard it is." And I was very fortunate that I went off to do a workshop in Australia, which I attend nearly every year now. And as a result of that, I discovered that watercolour isn't hard at all. But my style is very loose and I have a lot of fun with it. But the magic of the watercolour comes from the interaction of those pigments and the water. You know, it's water with colour, and you introduce the water to the paper and then you drop the colours in. I don't pre-mix any of my colours in the palette, and you drop those in on top and they just explode with life, and they mingle and they fight with each other, and some of them seep into the depths of the paper, and others completely disappear, and others just leave a hint of themselves, just a stain across the surface of the paper. Because watercolours for centuries, they're probably the oldest form of colour in art known to man. They go back to the caveman era. But for centuries they've been termed fugitive. They've been behind glass. Everyone thinks they're a delicate medium. They scare people. But they're not like that now. And now the pigments that are available have been highly researched. They're still very organic, but they're very high quality, and they're mixed with gum arabic, which is, you know, very, very old medium used to provide the substrate for the colour, for the pigment to be introduced. So some of them are ethereal. You know, you can introduce them to the paper and they're transparent, and then you can go transparent on transparent on transparent and build them up. And what happens is the light that we see all around us, the light that I want to capture and paint, passes through the pigment and onto the white paper, and then it bounces back through that pigment again, and you get this luminous quality that is just incredible. I discovered drawing, and I love to do that, and my partner encouraged me to do more of it. And then in 2012 actually, I went to a wonderful venue called Art Escape that happens every year in Cairns, and I'm going there next week again to work with John Lovett, who is one of Australia's premier watercolourists. And I went there and did a course with a wonderful local man who's an artist, who introduced me, and my first piece won Best Emerging Artist that year, which was an amazing event for me. So I actually contacted Mr. Morton Solberg, who's an American. He lives in Florida, and he is a master watercolourist. He actually hangs in the Smithsonian and also in the National Gallery. So I'm thinking, well, why not contact him and say, "What do you think?" Knowing that he's probably too busy, and you know, he wouldn't be able to give me any time. To my surprise, 2 hours later, he emailed me back and he said, "I'd love to critique your work," which he did. And now he is my main mentor. We speak electronically nearly every week, and he has kindly told me he would be honoured to be part of my biography with my debut with Lisa. So after Pride won Best Emerging Artist, I started entering other work, and it started winning competitions, which was a little bit staggering. I kept looking over my shoulder wondering who this is, because I'm sure it isn't me. And now, with the tremendous support of people like Lisa and Mort and my wonderful partner and my family and my friends, the sky's the limit. But my aim is to bring light and life into people's lives. I love watercolor. I've got a lot of ocean in my background. I love painting reflections. I love how you can see something in a reflection that you don't necessarily see in real life. And that's what I would love people to see in my work. I would love to start the story for them and have them take themselves on the journey, as trite as that may sound. They can then say, oh yes, I can recognize what that subject is, but where is the journey leading me? And they get to make up their own story. And I'm very happy to share mine, but that way, hopefully it sparks an emotion and perhaps a memory, perhaps a wish, but something deep inside them. I would like to be able to resonate with that on that level. I would love for people to see the life and emotion in the eyes of the birds and the animals that I paint. They're sending a message. Most of those that I paint are endangered, and I've been fortunate enough to donate some work to organisations such as Living with Wolves and Project Orangutan to raise money, and it's wholly donated. And what that does is, I think it helps me to help fulfil my own moral obligation to give a little bit back, because we share the planet, without getting on my moral high horse. We share the planet, and we are responsible for the well-being of everything on this planet. And we need to redress some of the poorer choices that we've made during our tenure here. So there is nothing better than, I was up in the Pecos wilderness a couple of weeks ago, and we saw a bear just right in front of us, crossing the wilderness. Scared witless of us, but off it went. So, of course, I've got now bears floating around in my head. Last night I heard coyotes howl. So, I'm thinking about them, and so it's about life and light and movement and imagination, and giving someone an uplifting experience. So perhaps it just pulls something out of them that might brighten their day just a little bit and lighten their load just a little bit. I love to paint. I wake up in the morning, I dream about it. And if I've got my act together enough, I'll write my dreams down on a bit of paper. And then I can't wait to get into the studio in the morning. So I'll rush into my studio, and hopefully somebody brings me a cup of tea. Doesn't always happen. I have to get my own. And then I can just start with a freeing up exercise. So just get a piece of paper, and it has to be good, because you never know if a masterpiece is going to sneak up on you. And throw water on it, and then just fling whatever colours I choose for the day on there. And then I let it go. And every now and again, a week or two later, after living with these pieces, something will suggest to me what it should be, and I'll turn it around and think, oh, that's what that is. So then I'll start working up a value sketch, and then a colour piece, and then work my way towards the final piece. I use only the finest paper, Arches, which is made in France, of pure cotton rag. And so it's not a pulp, it's not made from wood. And it is archival, it's pH balanced, acid free. And I use a rough surface, so it has hills and valleys. So when you introduce the water to the paper, and then you have to wait, you've got to be a little bit patient, which I'm not so good at, so you can wag it in front of the window if you want, but the water acts as the medium, and it soaks into this rag. And then at the right time you can introduce your colours, and I don't pre-mix my colours, I drop them in one on top of each other, so that they can, when they mix and they mingle, they create their own colours. And then, as I said before, you can layer colour on colour when it's dry, If you don't do that, you get what's called a bloom, which traditionally has been frowned upon, but these days can be exploited to create fantastic effects. Fantastic. And I use salt, which creates this osmotic, the salt draws the water to it, leaving the pigment behind, so you end up with this amazing effects. And then I also use Glad wrap, of all things. I think you call it saran wrap here. And you put that on and squish it all together, and where it touches the paper, there's no pigment. And when you dry it, you pull it off, and you've got these fantastic shapes. So you can then exploit those shapes to create things like hair, or leaves, or rocks, or any kind of texture that you want. This is my third trip to Santa Fe. I love Santa Fe. 2 years ago, my partner and I were here in Santa Fe, and we came to Longworth Gallery. And apart from loving the beautiful Adobe Pueblo style architecture and these gorgeous gates on the outside, as you walked in, the scent of the garden surrounded you. It was an ethereal type of presence. You felt calm and peaceful. And then in the midst of this calm and this peace are these glorious pieces of art. Sculpture and paintings, the jewellery, the lamps. There was a home created here. And I loved that feel. I then walked into the gallery, which was filled with natural light, and yes, pieces were highlit by artificial lighting, by gallery lighting. But up from the desk rises this Amazon-esque beautiful woman with the most amazing red hair, with this delightful smile on her face. It informs me that she's from Oxford. And of course, being Australian, and she's a POM, there was that sort of, oh, really, where are you from? And I'm really the prisoner of Mother England coming from Australia. And she welcomed me to her home. And that really struck a chord with me. Lisa knows more about her artists and her art than any other curator I have met, bar one in a national museum back in Australia. She resonates with the people that she has collected in this amazing place. She gets the people, she gets the artists, she gets their work. So she is eminently qualified to act as our ambassador. So my partner took it upon himself to show my work to Lisa. And Lisa liked what she saw. And encouraged me, and over the last 2 years has apparently been keeping a watching brief, and I send her a hello every now and again. So I contacted her and I said I'd love to catch up for a cup of tea or a glass of wine and just say hi, because she's such a beautiful person, as is her partner Michael. And anyway, she said, I've been keeping an eye on you, and I would like to think about representing you. And you could have knocked me over with a feather. To say that I'm honoured and humbled, I've already used that phrase before, but it really, there is nothing else I can think of that can describe that feeling when being asked to be part of this kind of collection. The fact that she's asked me to hang with the people that are on these walls is nothing short of a dream come true, and I have to pinch myself. It really is surreal, and to say surreal in this gallery gives it a whole new meaning. Because although we talk about metaphorical realism and the beautiful work of Michael Parks, the feeling of being here and having this experience is surreal. So what it means to me is an opportunity to communicate with a wider audience. I had an experience in my first exhibition back in Australia, which was last year. And I had this really big piece, and it was called Night Watch. I spent 7 years living on a yacht and sailing around the place and went through some bad weather and some good weather. And it was largely sepia and indigo in tone, with a horizon of orange and a glittery sea done with rough brush strokes skittering across the top of the paper, and the reflection of the huge swathe of storm that was coming down with a yacht going into it. And it's only hinted at again because it's someone else has to tell the story, but I'll tell you my story. To me, even going through some really bad experiences on the oceans, without exception, there was always light at the end of the passage. So whales might appear the next day, something magical would happen with your day. But the worst possible storm always brought light, always. And that's what I want my work to do. So in a way, I was saying this with this piece. This lady came up to me after I did an artist in residence, and after that was over, and she said, what are you trying to say with this? I really love the piece. What are you trying to say? And I said, well, before I tell you my story, why don't you tell me, share with me what it means to you? And she started to cry. And I was devastated that I'd upset her somehow. And she said, no, please don't be upset with me. I don't mean to be like this. But her husband was gravely ill, and he'd just come back from hospital, but he'd come back a changed man. And so the man that she knew was no longer, there were hints that, and he looked, of course, like the same person, but their interaction had changed. And she was trying to find a way within herself to move forward with this person who she's loved her whole life and would never desert. And she was looking for a light at the end of, it gives me goosebumps to think about it, at the end of that journey, that she was going to come out of the dark and into the light. And she bought the piece. And we had a bit of a cry together. And to think that something like that, I've had that effect on somebody, and she's now living with that, and every time she looks at it, she can remind herself that you always move into the light. That's worth more than palaces. As a paramedic, you go into people's homes, invited or not, and there's an obligation on you to do the best that you can, and you're invited into people's lives in an extremely close and personal relationship. When I was a student, I found that quite staggering, that people had this inherent trust. In Australia, we're the most trusted profession for 10 years running or something. And I never thought to experience something like that again. And now it seems that through certain pieces with the right person, I'm able to touch people again in a way that was perhaps uninvited. So that in and of itself is an honour. Because you don't play with people's emotions. You participate with them, but hopefully to put a smile on people's face. But when you make them cry, that's a whole other level.